Hi, Tara Doyle and a King here, the President and CEO of the Puyallup-Sumner Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the C-Suite. This is the C-Suite podcast. We are in our second season. Our first year, we interviewed many executives throughout the Pacific Northwest, learned a lot about their leadership journey. We had your CEO from the Washington State Fair. We had Sean Broback of Trackside Crockett's Public House. We had Sound Family Medicine executives, multi-care executives, so really kind of worked our way with some key stakeholders in our community. This season, I want a slight pivot. I'd like to really get to know all of the superhumans that are here in this community. We are the land of generous people, and there is some incredible generosity, some wonderful innovation, great leadership, and so we want to break into that, unpack that a little bit more, and learn from these folks. Learn their challenges they've had, uncover their superhuman powers, and also just, again, share their insights along the way. So today, without further ado, I've chosen two very special people that are very generous, both with unique pathways that have fortuitously intersected one another. One is Dave Robbs, the Executive Director of Poyeho Project, and the other is Robert Kaelin, used to be a Microsoft engineer, now a courageous business owner, also started a nonprofit, Generous Influencers. So we're going to hear their story, hear about their journey, and then also see what brought them together to collaborate in this great community. But first, we have their theme song, of course.
Hakuna Matata.
We will have Dave Robbs and Robert Kaelin joining us.
Hakuna Matata. Ain't no passing craze. These are worries for the rest of your days. It's our problem free.
We chose this song for a reason. It's perfect.
Hakuna Matata.
Well, hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. How many times do you get to walk out to your own theme song?
How's it feel, Dave?
Not near often enough.
I love it. Well, I am so excited to have you two here. Dave, you're one of the first people I met here in the Puyallup-Sumner Chamber community, and so you are near and dear to my heart with your welcoming smile and words of wisdom and insight. So I'm grateful you're here for season
Good to be
2.
here.
Robert, you're an all-around stud.
Oh, thanks.
Can I say that? Sorry, Jackie, but he is. He really swings big. He swings with a big heart. He leans in just the most generous way. So we'll hear some great stories from Robert, too, on his journey. So thank you both for being here. Let's go ahead and just start back from the beginning. We'll certainly talk about what your roles are today, but I think it's important to go back to, where did you grow up? You were a child. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I hardly remember it, but yes, I was a child at one time. I was actually born and raised in outside of Kansas City, Kansas.
Okay.
And moved to Southern California with my parents when I was 15.
Okay.
In Southern California, I met my wife. We were married in 1971.
I was 2.
And so, and then we moved up here to the Northwest in 1978.
Okay.
And we have 3 children. We have 8 grandchildren.
Uh-huh.
And they all live within 5 miles of our house, which is pretty amazing and blessed.
Pretty amazing. Nobody wanted to fly the coop too far from
No.
Mama and Papa Bear.
That's it. And we have a very close family. Everybody's good with everybody. The in-laws, the outlaws.
I don't believe it.
Everybody's
Not
good.
true.
So, but that was the beginning. I started out in 1969 in the manufacturing environment, and I was there for 31 years. The only thing I didn't do was actually run a machine, so I've done every other aspect of what goes on in a machine shop. I've worked for large corporations and small machine shops, so that's my...
What were some of those large corporations you worked for?
Well, my first job was with a company called Byron Jackson Pump Company, so it wasn't in like aircraft industry and stuff like that where people are more familiar with that, but we made huge pumps. We made pumps for nuclear power stations for cooling reactors. We did pumps for nuclear powered submarines. And all of our nuclear type pumps, they had to run on our test floor for 1 year before we, excuse me, took them down and refitted the wear parts and then sent them out.
Great. So kind of grew up through the manufacturing, distribution, supply
Right.
chain kind of world, would you say? Okay.
Right.
Great.
And I gained all my business skills in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw things that worked and didn't work. Pardon me.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm fighting some allergies, so.
No problem.
But anyway, so that's kind of where all my background came from in terms of business, and in terms of helping people. It was very much a hands-on kind of learning and environment and so forth.
You skipped over the childhood really quickly. I'm wondering if
yes.
it's, again, because you don't remember? Is that
No,
what you were teasing?
no.
No,
I have to
I
stretch,
am
but-
curious. And this is what I'm here to do, is to stretch you a little
Okay.
bit. Just, when you were a kid, what kind of kid were you?
I was fun. Of course, back in those days, we didn't have all these electronic whatsies, and so we actually played outside.
Sure.
And and we lived we had 2 acres of property,
Okay.
along with all the adjoining homes were the same. So did a lot of sports and things like that outside. And
I got to imagine you were a good kid.
yes, I was a pretty good kid.
Mhm.
Yep, I didn't get into. I only got in trouble one time.
One time.
And there was
Jeez.
at school.
One time.
At school, and there was a group of us that they were hauling to the principal's office, and I just kind of drifted to the back,
Oh,
faded to the right,
look
and
at you.
so
Got
I
out of it,
stayed
huh?
out of it. Yeah,
Wow.
That's actually a pretty good skill set there.
Pretty
to
smart.
bob and weave a little bit there.
Yeah.
Nice. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I really was pushing towards engineering and that type of thing when I was in high school and so forth. And of course, my first job was in industrial engineering,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't take that.
Whose
I was
first job
studying
is
for
in
civil
industrial engineering?
Yeah.
I love it. All right, so born to be an engineer.
Yeah.
Sounds like
Yeah.
you got that mind. That's the systems mind
Mhm.
process. I love it. All right, well, let's kick it over to Robert and learn a little bit about your background,
Yeah.
where you grew up, and what you wanted to be when you grew up.
That's awesome. So I like to say I was born and raised in Puyallup. That's kind of a lie. I moved here. My family's from here and has been for a few generations. I moved here from Olympia when I was 5.
Okay.
And then, what did I want to be when I grew up? My brother and sister, we made a ton of movies as kids.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought I was going to get into the film industry. In fact, that was one of the jobs that I had prior to Microsoft. I was in the film industry doing TV commercials and did a lot of talking head stuff at Microsoft and Amazon and,
Cool.
and things. Yeah.
So watching us debacle this for the last half hour is just, you must have been.
You guys
It's
got
okay.
it under control. You're doing an
We're
awesome
a little
job.
out-practiced, aren't we?
No,
Just
not
a
at
little
all.
out-practiced, aren't we, Hannah?
It's awesome.
Good.
This is good.
Awesome. And so you're married, you have
Yeah.
2 kids, right?
Yeah, so married. My wife and I own Elements, which is a fun story of leaving Microsoft in the midst of a pandemic and
Yeah, that's a smart move.
having a small business. And yeah, it's crazy. But I wouldn't change it at all. I mean, we've grown a ton and learned a ton and grown closer together. And, it's really required us to lean on each other's skill sets in a big way, in the ways that I'm not skilled and she is, and vice versa. And so it's been really cool.
Good mashup there.
It is a great mashup, yeah. Then my kids are awesome. My son's 15. He's taller than me now, which is a weird situation.
You don't go backwards from that.
You don't, yeah. He's playing water polo at Puyallup High School,
Awesome.
and my daughter's in gymnastics, and yeah, loving it. So
Good. Well, again, I'm going to slow things back, roll it back a little, go back to being a kid.
Okay.
What was your first job?
my first job, I worked at my grandfather's Christmas tree farm on Shaw Road for $2
It's
an
either
hour.
blueberries or Christmas trees in this area.
Yes.
Do you notice? A raspberry, strawberry?
Yep. Yep. And my mom and my grandfather talked about picking berries and bulbs down the bottom of
Yep.
Shaw Road at Van Lair Farm and
Oh,
where
yeah.
Fund 12 is now. Yeah.
Awesome.
We go back a ways. My family's the Shaws. So it built Shaw Road and
Wait, what?
yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Did you know this?
I didn't.
Oh my goodness.
Learn something new every day.
The Shaws. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is kind of a familiar name around
Like
here.
of Iran or
Not that kind of Shaw.
Not that
Oh,
kind
okay.
of Shaw. Shaw Road.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
What did you study in school?
Like college?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like any
So I had
school.
I had a big gap. So I went to Emerald Ridge High School,
Okay.
and I actually was like so afraid to give a presentation that I left high school
Mhm.
and did running start at Green River, just enough to get out of high school. I got enough credits, and I was like, I'm out, and I moved to California. And,
Because of a fear of public
Because of a
speaking
fear
or
of
kind of
public
presentation.
speaking,
Oh,
yep.
wow.
Auburn School District didn't require a senior project at that point, and so I was like, well, sign me up. I'm going there. And so I did everything I could to get out of doing any like speaking or any of that stuff, and moved to California with my brother who lives there. He moved like right after high school,
Mhm.
pursue acting, and it was awesome, but I couldn't get a job down there, so I came back
Okay.
and got into the film industry up here. And when I went to Microsoft, I started college. So virtually nobody at Microsoft doesn't have a 4-year degree at least.
Sure.
And I was like, well, let me see if I can, I'm not an engineer.
Mhm.
I don't know engineering. So I went and actually studied leadership
Mhm.
and learned a ton while I was like not only going to college but applying it. As you know,
Mhm.
it's just so much more like the experience is richer when you're doing it and seeing
Absolutely.
it at the same time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was where I kind of my story with school, and here we are.
And here we are.
Yeah.
So, speaking of leadership, if you were both to look back on prior jobs, and again, it can be your first job, your fifth job, I'd love to hear an example of a good leader and a bad leader that each of you might have encountered.
Okay, I would say they both happened at the same company.
Oh,
That was the first company I worked for. I was in a position after 4 years of being promoted to my boss's position, leading the programming group.
mm-hmm.
And, at that point I'm like 22, 23 years old. And I could see the headlines, young kid makes good, and, and all this kind of thing. But my boss communicated to me that was what was going to transpire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm all excited. I'm charged up. And when he gets promoted, they bring another individual in off of the shop floor to take that position. Nobody says anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my immediate boss, he was a great guy. But the guy above him failed to mention anything about what was happening. So in my mind, it was like, well, Art said one thing, but something else is happening. So I started looking for work, and I knew how I was in terms of competing with the guys in that group,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know out in the rest of the world how I would compete. I found out that I had some skills,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got an offer, more money, car with all expenses paid, doo-dah. And so I turned in my 2 weeks notice. And then my boss's boss called me in and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm getting another job."
I'm growing. I'm spreading my wings.
That's right. And he says, "Well, we had great plans for you. We wanted to bring you in and do this." I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, I from my position, I just saw something that was different than what had been communicated to me."
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought something got lost. And so great communication from one boss,
Mm-hmm.
no communication
From the
another
other.
boss.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just told him, if if that's you might in the future, if that's your plan, you might want to
Let
include
somebody
who that
know.
individual
Yeah.
is as to what's actually happening.
Sure.
So I left, moved out, got this other position. Great job, and that was the beginning of me being able to move from one position to another
Sure.
and kind of being in control of my own destiny.
And maybe even communicate it more.
Exactly.
This is what I'm going for, and
Yeah.
probably have that dialogue with your supervisors.
All right.
Awesome. How about you, Robert?
It's huge. Let's see. When I was at Microsoft, I had like the best boss. Paul, if you're watching this, he lives in Puyallup, actually.
Oh wow, Paul from Puyallup.
Yeah. Paul was
Are
a
you a
great
chamber
boss.
member, Paul from Puyallup? You
He's
should
not-
be.
He's not. He since has moved on to another large organization up in the area.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Paul was awesome. I got transferred underneath him 2 months after I started at Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
And originally I was like, okay, who's this guy?
Yeah.
You know? And he pulled me outside of the office and was like, hey, I believe in you. I want you to do this. He kind of called me up and just throughout the whole time of us working together, which was the 7 years that I was there,
Yeah.
he just constantly called me up.
Nice.
And everything does rise and fall on leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when you have a leader who calls you up and calls out the potential in you, and you know, even if you don't recognize it in yourself, it just makes for great relationships and great teamwork and increased potential, right? And
Sure.
so that would be my big
Right.
story of a good leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say bad leadership, man, that's just me. Like all the bad stories I can think about of leading was,
Oh gosh.
well, no, I'm serious. It's come from like learning all what not to do, you
Yeah.
know, and the failures that I've had in my own life. And, you know, I recognize I messed this up. Okay, well, tweak this and change that and learn from it and move to the next
Yeah,
thing.
there was that one time.
No.
So humble.
Too
Well,
many.
that was kind of segues into my next question, which does have to do with, you know, leaning into failures and,
Yeah.
you know, all of your great successes. There's probably a failure somewhere in there or stumbling block.
Yeah.
Can you think of any you might want to share?
Sure. One of the things when I started Poyeho Project, you know, I knew a little bit about Africa, but not much. And so, you know, I made a lot of mistakes, culturally, things like that I had to kind of backpedal and approach from a different standpoint and so forth. And so, but I always made an effort to learn from the mistakes. I like the statement that says if you're gonna fall forward.
Mhm.
And so there have been a lot of those, but you know, there have been a lot of successes too. But it's learning from the mistakes you made.
Yeah. That's
Yep.
good.
So
That's good. I wouldn't say this a failure, but more of a stumbling block.
Sure.
Which was, you know, we took elements over 11 months before COVID hit.
Right.
And, you know, my wife and I had to lay our team off and divide and conquer. I opened, she closed. We did that every day until we could figure out how to do the next thing, you know. And so it was just constant iteration. And as you know, things changed so frequently in terms of requirements and all of those things that we had to navigate, that I was super thankful for the chamber and everything that you guys pushed out to us, because I had no time to even navigate
Sure.
any of it.
Survival.
And it was definitely like survival mode. And so that was a huge stumbling block to us. However, we learned a ton as we were going through it. What processes we need to bring people on, the processes that we needed to be able to grow. We have such an awesome team right now. Like, I'm just so thankful
You
that
do.
we went through COVID so that we could be where we're at right now. Not saying that our team before wasn't great, but the learnings that Jackie and I've had that have brought us together in this team has just been super awesome. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I agree. You've created quite the space there.
yeah. We have a lot of fun there.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
could feel it. It's a great culture. And I guess, you know, talking about culture, how much was culture talked about kind of when you were working through your ranks versus what you probably see today as a topic
Right.
that supervisors are leaning into and embracing.
Right. Well, back in those days, they didn't call it culture.
Yeah.
You know, they called it something else. Your values, your company goals, and those
Our
kinds
work
of
environment.
things. Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. And so I've experienced both good ones and bad ones. I've experienced ones that were stated well but not followed,
Sure.
and those kind of things. So as I grew up through that, I realized it. In fact, I used to tell some of the guys that work for me, I said, here's the thing, I won't make a rule or a law that I won't enforce.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't feel like it's valuable enough to enforce it, I'm not going to just give you some random rule.
Sure.
And so, I felt like that approach to management was really good for me because my guys knew they could trust me. They knew that I was, honest with them and all that type of thing. So
Yeah.
it's very, very important. And it really is culture, but we just didn't call it that.
Sure. And to you, culture isn't just the place you've provided for your staff to feel it, but I feel like your mission has a lot to do with the culture you're creating for your patrons that are coming in,
100%.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Culture it's literally everything that we do and how it communicates to the world around us, right? And we've been very intentional with how we set those things up. One of the things that I teach our team it's called room tone. All of us have walked into a room where somebody's argued, and we feel the tension in the air,
Sure.
right? And so what I say is, we want to set the room tone. Like when people walk in here, there's a certain energy that they feel when they come in. So we're setting that room tone. It's huge.
I never talk to so many strangers as when I go there because your room tone is set in such a way that people are just reaching out to you and chatting you up.
I
or
love to hear
throwing
that.
compliments your way.
Right.
And it's very good.
But I think it even extends outside of the doors, right, into the community
Sure.
and all the interactions that we have. So, I guess people would call that branding.
Sure.
Your brand.
Some might call it
Some
branding.
might call it branding. Yeah.
Yes. I'm intrigued with you. You both have, had careers where you got your skills. But then there was also a call to something greater that was a community problem or an issue larger than going in and making a widget today. There's problems that you wanted to get in front of. And so both of you, again, on unique and separate paths, have fortuitously intersected with some of that. And so I think of, in the pandemic, the pop-ups that you were, hosting for businesses, just as a way to say, hey, I've got some street frontage here. You can't open your brick and mortar.
Yeah.
I can have a patio out here. Come pop up and do your business here, which obviously evolved to the Puyallup Night Market,
Right.
which is no short, that was an amazing thing that you did there. And then obviously from that you've done conferences to develop leaders in the community and so many other things. And then you with Poyeho Project and what you're doing in South Africa to actually give them like all the tools, resources to run business themselves.
Right.
I guess talk a little bit about that calling and why and kind of what's the status of it now.
So my first visit to South Africa was in 2005. And I was going there kind of just like vacation, but there had been a ministry that had been started there in 2002, and I wanted to see what they were doing and how it was working out. And so when I was there, I saw two extremely obvious things. One was the incredible level of poverty that was there, and you didn't have to hunt for it. It was like right in front of you. And one of the things that was so amazing is you could have really a lot of opulence, wealthy people, and you go a half a mile or a mile and you've got people living in shacks.
Sure.
And it just the dichotomy of those two things was amazing. But what the other thing I saw was lots of opportunity. So they had like 80% of their population was impoverished. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, if I could take 10% of that 80% and give them expendable income that they could buy things. You know, for me as a business owner or a manufacturer, it's to my advantage to make that happen. And things like refrigerators. I mean, when do we buy a refrigerator here? Either the old one breaks down or we're changing styles or whatever, but there's multitudes of people there that have never owned a refrigerator.
Yeah, crazy.
And so if I'm a refrigerator manufacturer, it would behoove me to help raise that poverty class into like a middle class
Sure.
that could buy goods and all that kind of thing. And so the opportunity for that type of thing was just amazing, and people wouldn't believe me necessarily.
Yeah.
But it was just, I mean,
Was
it
that
was
you
stark.
just convening essentially the right people to
Right.
kind of provide that resource,
Right.
have them look at it a little differently?
And so I realized that if I can, so we took the adage, everybody knows the adage, you can teach a man to fish, you feed him for a day, you can, or give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But if I can train a man to own a fish business, I can support a village for generations.
I didn't hear that third part.
That third part's new.
I
The
like
Davism.
that. It's a Davism.
It is.
Of course it is. I love it. No, that's true, and you're
But you
definitely
can.
doing
You
that.
can-
Yeah.
You can create a whole different atmosphere. So a lot of what I would present when I came is there is a cause, and I would talk to people and I'd say, if I could guarantee you that your grandchildren would live in a different South Africa from you, I said, is that not a cause worth laying down your life for,
Yeah.
fighting for? And so it's just being able to motivate people that are basically hopeless.
Sure. Showing them
They
the way.
don't see anybody around them that's actually making it happen and doing it and all
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But when businesses started to open and people could see the reality, suddenly the interest began to shift.
Sure.
And they realized, because most of them would say that their dream was impossible, but that's because they looked at the end of the dream, and instead of how can I get there
Sure.
from
There's
where
some
I'm at,
tangible steps.
there are
And you
every
laid
time.
that out for them.
Yeah.
You were the
Every
bricklayer.
Yeah.
I love it. And then what was your role this year? You
Yeah.
made that trek. And so, well, I guess, first of all, how many times a year do you make it to South Africa?
Usually
one?
once a year.
Okay. And so throughout the year, building up resources and staying in contact
Right.
with everyone and
Right.
follow
So-
up, accountability,
Right.
new outreach probably.
Yes.
Okay.
So this was my 16th trip
Oh, wow.
since 2005.
Okay.
So.
And so, yeah, what was your role in this?
My initial role was just learning and really soaking it in. You know, going back to the Davism of teaching a person to have a fish business, right? And you can change a village for a lifetime. I really believe, and one of the reasons why I love the chamber is that the backbone of community is built on small business.
Sure.
Right? When small businesses rise and grow and thrive, the rest of the community benefits from it, right? Jobs are better, families are better, communities are better. And so it was really a passion for me to go over there too with my coaching and training in John Maxwell. I was like, well, I've got something I can offer.
Absolutely.
I had just finished writing my book, and you know, there's the leadership concepts that I've learned through my time that I wanted to just pass on. And so I went there to learn and just see how I could add value. And I didn't really have any expectations necessarily, but it was just an absolutely tremendous trip, and so thankful that I got to go on it with you and be on your 16th trip, see the impact and the legacy that you've built over there, and you know.
And you know his
It's been
wheels are
amazing.
spinning. He's,
Oh, 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
you
yeah.
know that's
And he
only
got-
going to go
he got-
tenfold again, right?
Yep.
He got bit by the Africa bug. So.
Aw,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, there's tons of opportunity over there that, you know, people are starting to recognize, but there's still a ton of opportunity.
Sure.
And, you know, the hope that comes from that, you know, as being an outsider that can see it, being able to pass that hope on to those people was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you quickly slid in your book, and I know you just wrote a book.
Yes.
Tell us about your book.
Yeah, the book is it's about leadership, really. It's called Generous Influencers, going to come out later this year.
Great.
But essentially, it's the pathway to influence, right? And leadership is influence, and how do we harness that? And how do we, I think a lot of times we think about influence as having a position.
Sure.
And really, it's just any relationship you have at all. You always have influence, whether you recognize it or not. And how do you leverage that to be able to make positive impact?
Yep.
And so that's really what the whole book is about. And yeah, I'm really
Awesome.
excited about it.
Oh, I'm excited for you.
Yes.
Hey, what would you say each of your superhero powers are?
Superhero. I would say innovation.
Yeah.
God has gifted me with the ability to come up with ideas that are like, where'd that come from?
Outside of the lane.
Yeah, outside of the norm.
Yep.
And
we need that.
So that's been something that I've been able to pour out in
Yeah.
a multitude of ways.
I love it.
So I did, there's a book out there called The 6 Types of Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. Phenomenal work, just came out recently. And I did an assessment through there. And the 2 things that really stood out was innovation. It was in ideas, right? So ideation, and then galvanizing. So I really love to get people to come together around something that matters, right? And so I would say that's my superpower is if there's a cause, like, let's just get everybody I know to come together and make something happen.
Gosh, British Bites. Great
Yeah.
example of
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
You rallied a community to come out and support when shipments had stopped for them and business that essentially had stopped.
Right. And now look at them, 2
Yeah.
locations.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. So
Yeah. Pretty cool.
yeah.
Pretty cool. So if you weren't, well, let's put it this way. I like to look at things and sort of have my own personal passion project called Gravel to Gold Ventures. And essentially, it is just really looking at everyone's gravel to gold journey.
Yeah.
And so, if you were to look at that gravel to gold journey and where you think you're on that journey, at what point you are now, what would you say? Are we at the gold? Are we getting to the gold? And what does the gold look
Yeah.
like?
I'll go first because I don't think I'll ever arrive at the gold.
Yeah.
I look at it in terms of like a mountain that I'm climbing, and there's different plateaus that or summits that I'll land on. But again, I'll say I don't think I'll ever arrive. I'll always be growing, always be learning, always be pushing towards that greater thing. And I feel like I've come a long way, coming from
The guy who left schools just to get out of public speaking
Yes.
to now public speaking in front of hundreds.
right, yeah, putting on my own conferences. What an idiot!
Yeah,
No.
I love it.
That's what I would have thought when I was in high school. Why
I
is
would
that guy
say
doing
that's
that?
quite the leap for
Yeah.
sure. What does 5-10 years look like for you? That big swing working
Yeah.
towards that goal. What do you see? I mean, we have a book. We have a movie deal. What else do we have?
I would say my 5 to 10 year kind of thing is I've got counterculture leadership, leadership development. I see that becoming something where I travel around the world and really help next generation of leaders lead.
Great.
So that's kind of my passion. I want to see the next generation rise up in a way that my generation didn't, and take it from there.
I love it.
Yeah,
And he's
I imagine we'll
already
be collaborating
international.
on some of that.
Let's
Since
go.
That's right in line with my vision.
let's go.
Perfect. How about you, Dave? Where are you at on your gravel hill journey?
I would say that I'm panning. I haven't
Love
got
The gold rush has not
I-
struck quite yet.
Yeah, well,
Couple nuggets?
I haven't gotten into the big vein,
Oh,
if I can put it that way.
the glory hole.
Yeah, exactly. but I'm finding nuggets in the things that I have been doing and continue to
Absolutely.
do. And so I would say that's kind of where I'm at. I'm at the nugget phase.
Yeah.
So I don't see all the gold yet, but I've gotten some.
I love that you're still mining for it.
Yep.
I love that you're still
Yep.
swinging. You guys are both truly gold in my book. Great assets in this community.
Thank you.
You fit the land of generous people name very, very well. Thank you both for being here again.
Thank you for
I'll
the
mention
opportunity.
both of you are ambassadors for the chamber as well, and you
Yep.
again wear that vest, jacket, whatever we have these days so well. It's more in your spirit than anything.
Yeah.
And Robert, you're now serving on our board, which
Yep.
again is just such a privilege to have you part of that leadership team. Again, you guys are great assets. Thank you
Thank
for
you
being
so
here.
much. Thanks for having
Thank
us
you,
on the
Tara.
podcast.
Absolutely.
awesome.
All right. Thank
Take
you.
care, guys.
Until next
Bye
time.
now.
You bet.